Welcome back to It's Your Law. Sheriff Lance and I are talking about the drug situation. Over the past many years, it's only gotten worse. We've spent millions and millions of dollars trying to prevent drugs from spreading, trying to prevent the health problems that come with drugs. We've criminalized things. We've sent a lot of people to prison. We've made it profitable, and if you follow the money,
right,
that's where you find what the problem is. And Sheriff Lance has an idea that maybe we've been going entirely in the wrong direction, and we ought to consider a new direction.
That's right. We've actually formed an organization called LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and it's officers like myself, people who've been on the front lines of the drug war, judges, prosecutors, former police officers, police chiefs, and we've come together and said, this is madness, this has to stop. We have a different approach. Let's decriminalize a lot of this stuff. Let's work on the education end of it. It should be a medical problem, not a law enforcement issue. And we've been busy in Colorado and Washington, and you've seen what's happening there with cannabis becoming completely accessible, and just tax and regulate the market. It's really a matter of who is going to control the market. That's what we're saying. It should be the government, and they should be taxing and regulating these things.
So you're taking the gang out of it.
Exactly.
And you're taking the profit out of it.
That's right.
And you're trying to get some kind of knowledge as to who really needs help from these drugs so you can help them.
Right.
As opposed to arresting them and sending them away, you get them to a hospital.
Right, right. And it's not doing any good. You know, take a problem like heroin. In order to get help, what's the first thing you have to do is admit that you're a felon and you're committing a felony. Well, who's going to go seek help when that's your first step? That's not working. We need to get these people help, and we have to do it by saying they need medical attention, not the criminal justice system.
Well, Lance, this makes a lot of sense, but you don't sound like a cop at all. What's happened to you?
Well, you know, I'm also a farmer, and, you know, we take practical approaches to things. We don't just throw money at things on the farm and go, well, that's not working, let's throw more money at it. How long would you be in business if you had a business model like this, where you kept throwing money at the problem and it wasn't working, so you said, well, gee, I'm going to keep throwing more money at it. In private business, you know that would not work.
Well, human nature being what it is, I can't think of a single example of where prohibition of anything has worked. We tried it with alcohol. We made it very profitable. We created gangs, and it didn't work. Obviously, people found it very desirable to drink who wouldn't have even been drinkers otherwise. We've done it with guns, we've done it with sex, and certainly we've done it with drugs. We've just driven up the prices.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I've talked to a lot of old timers, you know, when I go out and give speeches, and I asked them if they remember their grandparents talking about prohibition at all. And of course, a lot of the old timers will say, well, hell, I lived through it. What are you talking about? And I said, well, how did prohibition work back then? Did it work pretty good? And they'll tell you right out, well, it didn't work at all. You know, and they have some very strong language about it. And I say, you know, prohibition of cannabis is exactly the same thing. And people will say, no, it's completely different. Alcohol is completely different. How is it different? It's not different at all. It's exactly the same thing. You're just saying if you want to prohibit cannabis and be even tougher on it than it is now, all you're saying is it's okay with you that the money goes to gangs and drug lords, and it goes down this black hole where Lord knows where the money's going and what they're using it for. Of course, we all know it's going to fund terrorism. It's okay with you then. If you want to be tougher on drugs rather than smarter, which is what LEAP is saying, we need to be smarter on our approach to the drug problem. That's the direction we need to go in.
And imprisoning people, in my opinion, and we'll ask the ex-sheriff what he thinks about it, really hasn't been successful either. We probably spend more money on prisons than we do on education. And then when you add in the factor that we are supporting the families of these prisoners, we're paying twice as much for prison as we are on education, and I question that we're accomplishing anything.
It's very sad. It's a very sad state of affairs. The United States right now has the largest prison population and percentage of its population that's in prison than any other industrialized country on the planet.
And not only that, when we compare ourselves to Minnesota, similar makeup of population and similar size of population and a great deal of similarities, we have twice as many people in prison in Wisconsin as they do in Minnesota. Don't you think you guys were a little overzealous?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was a huge problem, and it is a huge problem. The drug war has created the militarization, if you will, of the police force. When I started out in law enforcement way back when, the police were community caretakers. Officer friendly was the officer of the day, if you will, was a person that could be approached for problems in the community. It's become a huge problem. When I brought this up when I was in Alaska, in Anchorage, the police chief actually stood up in front of the whole audience and said, I agree with everything that Sheriff Lance is saying here. And militarization of the police has become a big problem. And this was the police chief in Anchorage agreeing with me about this.
Hold that thought. When we come back after our next break, I'm going to ask you about what's happening in Alaska and the part you played in it.
Sure.
We'll be right back.